The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the city courthouse, reflecting off the polished wooden benches and casting long, golden shadows across the high ceilings. The air was thick with tension. Whispers echoed from the corners of the room, punctuated by the occasional rustle of papers and the faint tapping of shoes on the marble floor. Spectators were settling in, some shifting nervously in their seats, while a few reporters scribbled notes, cameras perched on tripods, ready to capture every significant moment. It was a day of high stakes, a trial that had gripped the city's attention for weeks, yet amid the formality and quiet anticipation, a small, unexpected presence was about to make the courtroom unforgettable. Emily, a 4-year-old girl, clutched her mother's hand tightly as they navigated the narrow aisle between the benches. Her tiny shoes made soft thuds on the polished floor, drawing occasional curious glances from the adults around her. Her mother, careful to keep Emily calm, whispered soothingly, "Stay close, sweetheart. This is a big place and we have to be quiet." Emily nodded, her small face serious, her wide brown eyes absorbing everything in the room: the towering judge, the rows of stern-faced lawyers, the courtroom spectators who seemed to command authority just by sitting still. Emily's gaze, however, kept drifting to a corner of the room that most of the adults barely noticed. There, sitting with quiet dignity, was a police officer with a K-9 partner. The dog, a German shepherd named Max, was impressive even at rest. His sleek coat gleamed in the sunlight, and his intelligent, amber eyes scanned the room with alertness. Max's posture was calm yet commanding. Every muscle seemed ready to spring into action if needed. He wore a small, official-looking badge attached to his harness, which caught Emily's attention immediately. "Mommy, look at him," Emily whispered, tugging gently at her mother's sleeve. "He has a badge. He's a superhero dog." Her mother smiled, trying to contain both amusement and a hint of pride at her daughter's curiosity. "Yes, Emily," she said softly. "That's Max. He's a police dog. He helps people and keeps them safe. He's very smart." Emily's eyes lit up as she nodded solemnly. She had always loved animals, especially dogs, but there was something different about Max. Something about him made her feel like he wasn't just a dog, he was someone important. The seriousness in his gaze, the way he sat so perfectly still, it was almost as if he understood the gravity of the courtroom. Emily's tiny fingers twitched as she wanted to reach out to him, to let him know she recognized his importance. Yet she knew better than to disturb the proceedings. The courtroom itself was a study in contrasts. Rows of polished wooden benches lined the room, facing the imposing judge's bench, which stood on a raised platform. Behind the judge, a large emblem of the state glinted in the morning light, a silent reminder of law, order, and authority. On either side, the lawyers' tables were neatly organized with stacks of evidence, folders, and laptops, ready for a day of rigorous arguments and testimonies. The audience consisted of a mixture of curious citizens, family members, and media personnel, all murmuring quietly, their voices hushed but charged with anticipation. Emily, small and almost insignificant in the grand expanse of the room, seemed to command her own little bubble of attention whenever she pointed or whispered to her mother. Though most of the spectators were focused on the trial, a few curious eyes occasionally flicked toward the tiny girl, wondering why she was so intensely fixated on the police dog. Max, oblivious to the attention, continued to sit with absolute composure, his ears twitching occasionally at the faint sounds around him. As the judge entered the room, the soft clapping of gavel against wood marked the official beginning of the session. The room instantly hushed. Lawyers straightened, papers shuffled, and the audience leaned slightly forward in their seats. Emily, still holding her mother's hand, shifted nervously but kept her eyes glued to Max. It seemed to her that while the adults were busy with words and arguments, Max understood something deeper, something unspoken yet critical. She couldn't quite explain it, but a sense of anticipation fluttered in her chest, the way it does before a big adventure begins. The officer whispered quietly to Max, giving him a subtle command. The dog's posture didn't change, but Emily's tiny fingers curled slightly as she observed the interaction. She felt a connection, a silent understanding that made her heart race in excitement. The courtroom's tension, so palpable to the adults, seemed to hold a different kind of energy for Emily, a mixture of curiosity, respect, and wonder. She wasn't worried about the seriousness of the trial. Her mind was captivated by Max, the calm and confident police dog who seemed to embody bravery and intelligence in every gesture. As the first witness was called, Emily shifted on her seat, her legs dangling. She whispered once more to her mother, "Mommy, he's watching everything. He knows what's happening." Her mother smiled indulgently, whispering back, "Yes, Emily. He's trained to pay attention to everything. That's his job." Emily's eyes widened further, her small hands clapping softly together. She had never seen a dog like this, so still, so alert, yet so confident. The mixture of awe and curiosity bubbled inside her, making it impossible for her to focus on anything else in the courtroom. Even the adults began to notice. A few glances flicked toward the corner where Emily had been staring. Some smiled quietly at the little girl's fascination, while others murmured about how children often notice things adults overlook. But no one could have anticipated how significant Emily's attention to Max would become. Her tiny gestures, her constant pointing, and her whispered comments would soon shift the focus of the courtroom in a way no one expected. By the time the lawyers began presenting the first pieces of evidence, Emily's interest had not waned. Each subtle movement of Max, the tilt of his head, the flicker of his ears, captivated her completely. She leaned closer to her mother, whispering theories and observations in the earnestness only a child could muster. Her mother, though trying to focus on the trial, couldn't help but notice that Emily's insights seemed oddly prescient, almost as if the little girl could sense Max's role before anyone else. And so, as the courtroom buzzed with professional tension, the stage was quietly set. Emily, a tiny girl with wide eyes and endless curiosity, and Max, the calm, alert police dog, were about to become the center of attention in a story that no one in the room would ever forget. The grand, formal courtroom held its secrets, but through Emily's innocent gaze, the first hints of something extraordinary were beginning to unfold, a connection between child and dog that would soon capture the hearts of everyone present. The courtroom's tension was a living thing, pulsing in the silence between testimonies. Every eye was focused on the witnesses, the evidence, and the lawyers' carefully chosen words. Yet Emily, perched on her mother's lap, seemed to exist in a separate world, a world where the drama of the courtroom was secondary to something far more important: Max, the police dog. Her small fingers twitched as she pointed subtly at him, whispering observations that no one else would notice. "Mommy, he's looking at the papers. He knows something here," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper, yet filled with an uncanny certainty. Her mother smiled, though a flicker of unease crossed her face. "Yes, Emily, he's trained to watch everything. That's what he does. But we need to sit quietly now." Emily nodded, her brows furrowing as if she were trying to reconcile her excitement with the rules of the courtroom. She shifted slightly, craning her neck to get a better view of Max. The German shepherd's eyes never wavered from the room's activities. Every sound, every motion, every shuffle of papers seemed to be catalogued in Max's sharp mind. To Emily, it was mesmerizing. The witnesses continued, detailing their accounts with careful precision. The lawyers asked pointed questions, seeking inconsistencies and clarity. Adults scribbled notes, whispered to colleagues, and occasionally adjusted their ties or jackets as if to remind themselves of their authority. But Emily's world remained fixed on Max. She noticed the subtle way his ears twitched when a particular piece of evidence was mentioned, the slight lift of his head when someone moved too close to the front of the courtroom. Emily's tiny eyes widened. He's reacting, she thought. He knows something. A few spectators began to notice the little girl's intense focus. An elderly woman in the front row leaned over and whispered to her companion, "Look at that child. She's been staring at that dog this whole time." The companion nodded, smiling. "It's adorable, but isn't it odd how much attention she's paying?" Indeed, Emily's gestures, subtle as they were, started drawing quiet curiosity. Her tiny hand would rise slightly, pointing toward Max, and then lower, her expression a mix of awe and determination. She wasn't just watching. She was communicating silently, understanding without words that this dog held a crucial part in what was happening. Meanwhile, Max remained calm, yet there was an undeniable alertness in his posture. His amber eyes scanned the room, flicking from the judge to the witnesses, then to the lawyers' tables, and finally resting on the subtle movements in the audience. Emily noticed every shift, every subtle adjustment he made. When the officer leaned forward slightly to murmur a command, Max's ears perked, and he shifted his weight just a fraction. Emily's hand twitched again, almost involuntarily, as if she were acknowledging the dog's silent communication. She whispered to her mother, "Mommy, he's listening. He's paying attention to everything." The mother leaned down, brushing Emily's hair from her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart, that's exactly what he's trained to do, but remember, we have to stay quiet." Emily nodded, her head bobbing solemnly, yet her eyes never left Max. Her fascination was more than a child's curiosity. It was an instinctive recognition that Max wasn't just a passive observer. He was an active participant in the proceedings, a silent guardian of truth, and Emily, in her pure and unfiltered way, was noticing what the adults had overlooked. As the trial continued, a new witness was called to the stand. The room held its collective breath as the young woman approached the microphone. Emily's eyes widened as she noticed Max's subtle shift. The dog's nose twitched slightly, his tail gave the faintest wag, and his posture became rigid for just a moment. Emily leaned closer to her mother. "Mommy, he's reacting. He knows something about her." Her mother glanced over discreetly, noticing the little girl's intensity. While the adults focused on testimony and evidence, Emily was attuned to a layer of the courtroom most people couldn't see: Max's instinctive awareness. Throughout the proceedings, Emily began whispering small observations, her voice a soft murmur. "He's watching the papers, he's looking at that man, he's alert." Her mother, torn between keeping Emily quiet and marveling at her insight, simply nodded, offering soft encouragement. Emily's tiny gestures, a finger pointing here, a glance there, started to capture the attention of the nearest spectators. A few heads turned subtly, curious about what the child was so engrossed in. But no one yet realized how critical her attention to Max would become. Max, meanwhile, remained the epitome of discipline. He did not bark, move excessively, or show signs of distraction. Yet Emily sensed everything. She noticed how his ears flicked when certain names were mentioned, how his tail twitched in response to specific motions, and how his head lifted at precise moments. She whispered softly to her mother, "Mommy, he's telling us something. I don't know what, but he is." Her mother smiled, squeezing her hand gently, unsure whether to marvel at her daughter's intuition or fear that she was imagining connections. The courtroom itself seemed to take on a rhythm, almost like a silent dance between tension and attention. Lawyers argued, witnesses recounted events, the judge listened, and the audience followed. Yet to Emily, the true narrative was unfolding in quiet moments, the subtle, unspoken communication between Max and the environment around him. Every slight movement, every barely perceptible shift, became meaningful. Emily leaned forward, eyes bright, absorbed in decoding Max's silent language. To the child, he was not just a dog. He was a sentinel, a silent observer, and perhaps even a guide in the unfolding drama. Hours seemed to pass in a blur of testimony and evidence. Emily, though small, remained a fixture in her seat, her focus unwavering. The adults around her began to notice more clearly the intensity of her gaze, the tiny gestures, the whispered remarks. It was clear that Emily was connected to Max in a way that defied her age. Spectators exchanged curious glances. Even the judge, glancing occasionally at the audience, noted the child's persistent attention to the police dog. Something was stirring in the courtroom, something subtle yet powerful, and Emily's awareness had set it in motion. By the end of the morning session, Emily had pointed at Max several times, whispered repeatedly to her mother, and observed the dog's reactions with astonishing acuity. Each subtle gesture drew quiet attention from nearby spectators, though most adults still didn't understand the significance. Max, calm and disciplined, seemed entirely aware of Emily's gaze, occasionally flicking a glance in her direction as if acknowledging her presence. The bond between child and dog, though unspoken, was unmistakable. As the court recessed for lunch, Emily leaned into her mother, whispering excitedly, "Mommy, he's special. He's going to do something important." Her mother smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's eyes. "Yes, Emily, he is special. Let's see what happens after lunch." Emily's heart raced with anticipation, her tiny mind filled with visions of Max's hidden abilities, ready to reveal themselves. The courtroom, unknowingly, was on the brink of a moment that would captivate everyone's attention, and Emily, in her innocent brilliance, was already a step ahead of them all. The courtroom had settled into a rhythm that balanced formality with unspoken tension. Lawyers shifted papers, witnesses adjusted their posture, and the judge's eyes scanned the room like a silent sentinel, absorbing every nuance of testimony. Yet amid the procedural rigor, the subtle undercurrent of attention to one corner of the room had begun to ripple. Emily, perched on her mother's lap, sat rigid, her wide eyes never leaving Max. Every tiny movement the German shepherd made, the twitch of an ear, the gentle lift of his head, the soft flick of his tail, was catalogued by the 4-year-old as if she were reading a secret language. "Emily," her mother whispered, "remember to sit quietly. The trial is important." Emily's head bobbed solemnly, but her eyes betrayed her excitement. She had noticed something that no adult seemed to grasp. Max was aware of things in the courtroom that others were blind to. He wasn't just observing, he was analyzing. She could see the concentration in his eyes, the subtle shifts in his posture that indicated he had noticed a detail, something the humans had overlooked. Her tiny fingers twitched, and she nudged her mother gently. "Mommy." "He's paying attention to everything," she whispered, voice trembling with awe. Her mother smiled indulgently but kept her voice soft. "I know, sweetheart. He's a trained police dog. That's what he does." As the first witness of the afternoon was called, the atmosphere thickened. The woman on the stand was clearly nervous, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of the podium. Emily's gaze shifted between the witness and Max, noticing how the dog's ears flicked subtly whenever the woman's voice wavered. A tiny part of Emily felt like Max was silently reacting to the witness's honesty, or lack thereof. Each micro-reaction from Max caused Emily to lean closer to her mother, whispering softly, "Mommy." "He's listening. He knows something about her." The courtroom was tense. The air was filled with the faint hum of whispers, the scratch of pens against paper, and the soft clicking of camera shutters from the back rows. Every adult seemed focused on the testimony, but Emily's world existed in layers the others couldn't perceive. She noticed Max's subtle shifts, his attentive gaze, the way his muscles tightened for a fraction of a second. She didn't know what it meant exactly, but she felt that these small signals mattered. Her heart pounded in anticipation, and her tiny hands gripped her mother's arm instinctively. Spectators began to notice Emily's unwavering focus. A few turned their heads discreetly, whispering to each other, "Look at that little girl. She hasn't taken her eyes off the dog this whole time. It's strange, almost like she understands him." Others chuckled quietly, dismissing it as mere childlike fascination. Yet something about Emily's intensity, combined with Max's disciplined presence, held an inexplicable power in the room. It was subtle, but it began to shape the attention of those around them. Even the judge's eyes flicked toward the child and the dog more than once, curiosity barely hidden. The lawyers continued their cross-examination. Their questions were sharp, precise, and demanding. Witnesses shifted uncomfortably, trying to provide answers that satisfied the probing scrutiny. But Emily's attention was singular. She leaned forward, whispering to her mother, "Mommy, he's noticing things that no one else sees." "Look," she pointed at Max, who subtly lifted his paw and turned his head toward a particular table where a folder of evidence lay untouched. Emily's voice was barely audible, but her conviction radiated through her small body. Her mother glanced discreetly at Max. The officer gave a slight nod in response to an internal command, acknowledging that the dog had detected something. Emily's mother whispered, "I think you're right, Emily. He is noticing." Emily's eyes sparkled. She felt a sense of triumph and anticipation, as though she and Max were quietly collaborating in the most secret and important mission. The tension in the courtroom escalated. Each piece of testimony seemed heavier than the last. Lawyers pressed for clarity, witnesses faltered under the weight of questions, and the judge maintained a firm yet patient demeanor. Amid all this, Emily's focus on Max remained unbroken. Every twitch of his ears, every slight shift in posture seemed magnified in her perception. She leaned closer to her mother again, whispering urgently, "Mommy, he's going to do something. I just know it." At that moment, the officer subtly signaled Max. The dog's movements were so slight that most adults wouldn't have noticed, yet Emily's eyes caught every nuance. Max's head lifted slightly, his tail gave a measured wag, and he adjusted his stance in response to the subtle command. Emily's heart raced. This is it, she thought. He's about to show everyone what he can do. Her small frame trembled with anticipation, and her whispers grew more urgent. Nearby spectators began to sense the shift. A few exchanged puzzled glances as the German shepherd subtly rose to his feet, scanning the room with laser focus. Something about the dog's alertness was unusual. He wasn't merely observing anymore. Emily's tiny hands clutched her mother's arm, and she whispered excitedly, "Mommy, he's ready. He knows what to do." Her mother, while keeping a composed exterior, felt a shiver of anticipation herself. Even without understanding exactly what was happening, the energy in the room had shifted, quietly yet undeniably. The judge paused the proceedings briefly, giving the officers space to manage Max. The tension was electric, almost tangible. Spectators leaned forward, some whispering in curiosity, others remaining silent in anticipation. Emily's excitement bubbled over quietly, her small frame shaking with the thrill of knowing something incredible was about to happen. She gazed at Max with absolute certainty, a bond forming that transcended words. "He listens to me, I can tell," she thought. As the afternoon progressed, Max began to move with subtle precision, his paws silent against the polished floor. Emily followed his every motion with rapt attention, whispering under her breath, interpreting signals only she seemed to understand. The courtroom buzzed with quiet tension as lawyers continued their questioning. Witnesses tried to maintain composure, and the judge's eyes scanned for any sign of disruption. Yet all of that faded in the presence of the silent connection forming between Emily and Max. Even the officer noticed the little girl's intuition. He leaned down and whispered a quiet acknowledgement, his voice low. "She's sharp, isn't she?" Max responded to a subtle hand gesture, alert and precise, as though Emily's awareness had amplified his own focus. Emily's eyes widened in silent triumph. She had known all along that Max was extraordinary. She had felt it in the first moments of entering the courtroom, and now the rest of the room was slowly catching up, if they paid close enough attention. As the session drew to a short recess, Emily's mother bent down and whispered softly, "Emily, you were right. Max noticed things that others didn't. You have a very special connection with him." Emily beamed, her small chest puffed with pride. She had spent hours observing, whispering, and understanding, and it had paid off. For the first time, she felt that the grown-ups might finally see what she had seen all along. Max was no ordinary dog, and her awareness of him mattered. The courtroom emptied slowly, yet the energy lingered. Emily held onto her mother's hand, her mind racing with anticipation for what would come next. She knew, with unwavering certainty, that Max would play a critical role in the trial. Her heart beat fast, a mixture of excitement, pride, and curiosity. The adults were unaware that the most compelling story of the courtroom had only just begun, quietly unfolding through the eyes of a 4-year-old girl and a vigilant police dog. In the silence of the emptying courtroom, Emily whispered once more, almost to herself, "Max, I know you'll do something amazing, I can feel it." And Max, sitting obediently beside the officer, seemed to meet her gaze briefly, a silent acknowledgement passing between child and dog, a promise that the next chapter of their story was about to captivate everyone in the room. The courtroom was tense, every person absorbed in the intricacies of the case, yet a subtle shift was occurring, unnoticed by most. Emily, perched on her mother's lap, had been quietly observing Max for hours, tracking every flick of his ears, every lift of his head, and every slight movement of his tail. To a casual observer, she might have seemed like any other restless child, fidgeting and whispering to her mother. But inside her mind, the threads of the trial were weaving together with Max's subtle cues, forming a picture that only she could see. Her small fingers twitched involuntarily as she leaned forward, eyes wide with anticipation. "Mommy, he's ready," she whispered, her voice trembling with both excitement and certainty. Her mother bent down, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Emily, remember to stay calm," she whispered, though she too felt a ripple of anticipation. Something extraordinary was unfolding in front of them, a silent, invisible thread connecting a 4-year-old girl to a highly trained police dog. The lawyers were mid-argument, voices sharp and commanding, discussing minute details of the evidence. Witnesses fidgeted nervously, and the judge scribbled notes in his large, leather-bound notebook. From the back of the room, a few spectators glanced at Emily, noting her unusual focus. Yet no one could have predicted what was about to happen. Emily's gaze locked on Max, who sat motionless but alert, his amber eyes scanning the room as if he could see through the tension, through the carefully scripted legal theater, to the hidden truths lying beneath. Then, almost instinctively, Emily shifted her small body, planting her feet firmly on the floor. She rose slightly on her toes and, without hesitation, pointed directly at Max. "That dog knows," she exclaimed, her tiny voice echoing across the silent courtroom. The effect was instantaneous. The murmur of voices died down, the clicking of pens halted, and even the judge's pen hovered midair. Every head turned toward the child, then to Max. The courtroom froze. For a moment there was no sound except the faint rustling of papers and the soft echo of Emily's exclamation. The little girl, fearless in her declaration, had drawn attention to the German shepherd in a way that no one had expected. The K-9 officer, who had been quietly observing the trial, allowed himself a small smile. He understood immediately what Emily had done. Her instinctive recognition of Max's importance had highlighted the dog at a critical moment. The officer approached, kneeling slightly to adjust Max's harness and give him a subtle command. Max responded instantly, shifting his stance and lifting his head slightly, acknowledging both the officer and, in some small, almost imperceptible way, Emily. The judge, initially startled by the outburst, composed himself quickly. "Is there a reason the child is shouting?" he asked, his voice firm yet curious. The courtroom remained hushed. Emily's mother whispered quietly, "She noticed Max, Your Honor. She thinks he knows something important." A ripple of chuckles spread through the spectators, but the tone was gentle, almost reverent. Emily, oblivious to the attention she had drawn, remained focused on Max. Her little chest rose and fell with excitement, and her fingers remained pointed, trembling slightly. She felt a rush of certainty, the kind of certainty that only a child's instinct can produce. "He's going to show them something. I know it," she thought. Max, sensing the shift in attention, straightened his posture. His eyes scanned the room with precision, moving from the lawyers' tables to the evidence, then back to the witnesses. The dog's calm demeanor and sudden alertness were impossible to ignore. The spectators leaned forward, intrigued by this subtle display of intelligence and discipline. Emily whispered to her mother, "Mommy, he's ready to do it. He's going to show everyone." The officer guided Max toward a specific area near the front of the courtroom, where an overlooked folder of documents lay on a small table. Max's nose twitched, and his paws moved with deliberate precision. The dog's movements were quiet but purposeful. Emily's eyes widened in amazement. She had spent hours observing him, anticipating his actions, and now her intuition was about to be validated. Spectators held their breath. Lawyers paused mid-sentence, witnesses froze in place, and even the judge leaned forward slightly. There was a shared sense of anticipation, an unspoken acknowledgement that something remarkable was about to occur. Emily's whisper, barely audible, carried through her excitement. "Mommy, look, he's going to find it." Max's nose touched the folder. He sniffed delicately, then gently pawed at it, indicating the presence of critical evidence that had been previously overlooked. The courtroom erupted, not with noise, but with a stunned silence that conveyed awe and disbelief. The significance of the dog's action began to dawn on everyone. Emily's small voice, pointing and exclaiming earlier, had been the spark that drew attention to this pivotal moment. The officer knelt beside Max, explaining to the judge and the spectators that the dog had detected a vital piece of evidence. Emily's mother held her daughter close, whispering, "You were right, Emily. Max really does know." Emily's eyes shone with pride, her tiny hands clapping softly together. She felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. In that instant, her instinctive observation, combined with Max's extraordinary training, had captured the attention of every person in the room. Spectators murmured in amazement. Lawyers, initially skeptical, now nodded in recognition of the dog's incredible abilities. The judge, a figure of stern authority, allowed a small smile to emerge. Max had not only demonstrated his skill but had also become the center of attention, and Emily, the little girl who had pointed him out, was now seen as an unexpected hero. The energy in the courtroom shifted dramatically. What had been a tense, procedural environment transformed into a space of awe and inspiration. Emily's bold gesture had broken the monotony of the trial, infusing it with human and animal connection, innocence, and instinctive brilliance. Every person in the room felt the subtle magic of the moment, the quiet understanding that even the smallest voices could influence events in powerful ways. Emily remained on her toes, her gaze locked on Max. She whispered softly, "I knew you would do it." Max, in response, gave a slight wag of his tail, his eyes briefly meeting hers as if acknowledging her role in the moment. The K-9 officer patted the dog's side, proud of his partner's performance. The bond between the child and the dog, unspoken but undeniable, had just revealed itself to the entire courtroom. As the session resumed, the courtroom's focus had shifted. Spectators were no longer passive observers. They were witnesses to a remarkable partnership between human and dog, catalyzed by the keen awareness of a 4-year-old girl. The trial continued, but the narrative had changed. Emily's courage and insight, combined with Max's skill, had added a layer of engagement and wonder that no legal argument could replicate. Every adult in the room had been reminded that intuition, innocence, and keen observation could be just as powerful as experience and training. By the time the lunch recess was called, Emily was still glowing with quiet pride. Her mother whispered, brushing her daughter's hair gently from her eyes, "You were amazing, Emily. You helped everyone notice Max." Emily's small hands were clasped tightly together, and her eyes sparkled with excitement. She had not only observed but had actively influenced the attention of everyone in the room. In that moment, she understood the power of trust, instinct, and paying attention to what others might overlook. The courtroom emptied slowly, but the energy lingered. Lawyers, officers, and spectators alike discussed in hushed tones the remarkable event that had just occurred, a moment where a child's keen eye and a dog's extraordinary skill had intersected. Emily's intuition had highlighted Max at the exact right time, and the courtroom would not soon forget it. As she walked hand in hand with her mother, Emily whispered once more to herself, almost as if promising the dog, "We did it, Max. We showed them." Max, obedient and calm, sat quietly beside his officer, unaware of the fame he was about to gain, yet fully aware of his role in the courtroom drama. For Emily, however, this was only the beginning. She had seen, understood, and participated in a moment that would echo far beyond the walls of the courthouse. The courtroom, still buzzing from Emily's bold declaration, was now completely focused on Max. What had begun as a curious child pointing toward a police dog had escalated into a moment of silent awe. Spectators leaned forward in their seats, their eyes fixed on the German shepherd, whose amber gaze scanned the room with laser precision. Emily, perched on her mother's lap, whispered with barely contained excitement, "Mommy, he's going to do it. I just know it." Her mother's heart thumped in sync with her daughter's, a mixture of apprehension and admiration filling the space between them. Officer Daniels approached Max quietly, kneeling to give a subtle hand signal. Max responded immediately, rising with fluid grace, his muscles coiling with purpose. He began moving deliberately toward the front of the courtroom, silent on the polished wood floor. Emily's tiny hands clutched her mother's arm, her wide eyes following every step. The spectators, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding, fell into hushed anticipation. Even the judge leaned forward slightly. His pen paused mid-note, eyes locked on the dog as though he might unravel a mystery all by himself. Max's movements were methodical, almost ritualistic. He sniffed along the edges of the lawyers' tables, his nose twitching at subtle scents invisible to human senses. Emily leaned closer to her mother, whispering urgently, "He's looking for something important, I can feel it." Her mother, caught between encouraging her daughter and maintaining courtroom decorum, nodded subtly, smiling. The courtroom atmosphere shifted. What had been tense and formal now carried an electric, almost cinematic suspense. Every person present was aware that the dog was about to reveal something critical. As Max approached a table on the far side of the room, Emily gasped softly. The German shepherd's nose hovered over a small folder, partially hidden under a stack of papers. He pawed at it gently, then sat, his posture rigid, tail flicking once in quiet alert. Emily's eyes sparkled with pride, and she whispered under her breath, "That's it, he found it." The judge leaned forward, eyebrows raised, as Officer Daniels explained, "Your Honor, Max has located evidence that was previously overlooked. This folder contains materials that are critical to understanding the case." The courtroom seemed to exhale collectively. Spectators murmured in astonishment, and even the lawyers exchanged glances, some nodding in reluctant approval of the canine's abilities. Emily's mother hugged her daughter briefly, whispering, "You were right, Emily. You saw him notice it first." Emily beamed, a small giggle escaping her lips, though she kept her eyes locked on Max, as if to ensure he knew she had been watching and had understood him all along. The judge, now fully attentive, gestured for Max and the officer to demonstrate precisely what had been detected. Max, obedient and precise, retraced his steps, moving from one piece of evidence to another, pausing at critical points. Each subtle cue, the tilt of his head, the pause of his paw, the slight lift of his ears, signaled significance. Emily whispered again, "He's showing them what I've been seeing, he's so smart." Her mother squeezed her hand, amazed by how their small daughter's instinctive recognition had set the stage for this demonstration. The spectators were mesmerized. Cameras clicked softly from the back of the courtroom, recording the moment that would soon go viral. Reporters leaned forward, pens flying across notebooks, capturing every movement, every reaction. Emily's quiet exclamations punctuated the silent awe, giving voice to the wonder that everyone felt but few dared to express. Look where he's going, he knows," she whispered, bouncing slightly on her mother's lap. The courtroom energy had transformed, filled with a mixture of admiration, suspense, and amazement. Lawyers, initially skeptical, now stood with restrained fascination. They had been trained to rely on evidence, logic, and witness testimony. But here, a dog and a child had revealed a truth that required no words. Max's precise and deliberate actions highlighted critical evidence that had been overlooked. The significance was undeniable. Emily's tiny gestures, pointing, whispering, and observing, had guided attention to the dog at exactly the right moment. This partnership between instinct, innocence, and training was captivating everyone present. Max paused again near a folder that had lain untouched on a corner of the table. His nose twitched, tail flicking once, eyes fixed. Officer Daniels knelt slightly, signaling Max to indicate the critical contents. The dog's training and intelligence were evident in every movement, precise, controlled, and deliberate. Emily's eyes widened in recognition, her small hands clapping softly. "Mommy, he's showing them everything. He's amazing," she whispered, filled with awe. Her mother, sharing in the wonder, tried to stay composed in the formal courtroom, but could not hide the pride swelling in her chest. The judge called for silence as Max remained fixed in position, indicating the significance of the evidence. Spectators watched in stunned amazement, realizing that the dog's instincts had revealed something that human eyes had missed. The courtroom was not just witnessing a demonstration, it was witnessing a revelation. Emily's intuition, her pointing, and Max's trained responses had converged to create a moment of extraordinary clarity. The courtroom, for once, was united in silent admiration for the canine detective and the child who recognized him first. Lawyers approached cautiously, examining the evidence Max had indicated. The murmurs grew louder, acknowledging that this overlooked folder contained items critical to the case's progression. Emily leaned toward her mother, whispering softly, "I knew it, he was going to help." Her mother smiled, brushing a strand of hair from Emily's face. "You saw it first, sweetheart. You helped them notice Max at the right time." Emily's small hands clenched in triumph. The courtroom had recognized Max's skill, but Emily's instinctive recognition had set the entire chain in motion. The officer guided Max back to his original position, kneeling briefly to reward him for his exceptional work. The dog, calm yet alert, settled back beside the officer. Emily clapped softly, her tiny frame vibrating with excitement. The courtroom's attention, once focused solely on the trial, had shifted to the partnership between a child and a police dog. Spectators, lawyers, and even the judge were captivated by the quiet heroism unfolding before them. Emily's pointing, once overlooked as childlike curiosity, had been instrumental in revealing the significance of Max's actions. As the afternoon session continued, the courtroom energy remained transformed. Witnesses spoke with renewed gravity, lawyers adjusted their strategies, and the judge maintained careful control, yet every person present carried a spark of fascination. Emily's intuition had been validated, and Max's skill had been demonstrated. Together, they had reshaped the narrative, proving that keen observation, instinct, and training could surpass expectations. The courtroom had been reminded that sometimes, insight comes from unexpected sources, a child's innocent awareness and a dog's trained intelligence. Even after the recess, the story of Max in action and Emily's bold recognition spread quickly through whispers and quiet conversations. People couldn't stop talking about the extraordinary demonstration they had witnessed. Emily, still perched on her mother's lap, smiled softly, proud yet composed. She had seen, understood, and anticipated Max's actions. Her instinct had guided the attention of everyone in the courtroom, highlighting the dog's extraordinary abilities at precisely the right moment. By the end of the day, Emily and Max had become the unsung heroes of the courtroom. What began as curiosity had transformed into revelation, admiration, and inspiration. The courtroom had witnessed the rare synergy of child and dog, instinct and training, intuition and skill. Emily's quiet determination, combined with Max's disciplined precision, had captivated every observer, ensuring that this moment would not soon be forgotten. The courtroom had shifted into a state of quiet anticipation. Spectators, once focused solely on witness testimony and lawyer arguments, now leaned forward, their eyes locked on Max. The German Shepherd had become more than a police dog. He was the centerpiece of a drama that none of the adults had expected. Emily, perched on her mother's lap, barely breathed, her small hands clenched together as she whispered, "Mommy, he's going to show them everything. I just know it." Officer Daniels knelt slightly, giving Max a subtle command. The dog's ears twitched, his nose sniffed the air, and his amber eyes scanned the tables where stacks of documents and evidence had been placed. Every subtle gesture of the dog carried significance. The courtroom held its collective breath, sensing the extraordinary display that was about to unfold. Emily's excitement radiated in quiet waves, her body leaning forward with anticipation. She had noticed this moment forming hours ago, recognizing the silent signals of Max's attention, and now it was coming to fruition. Max moved with deliberate, measured precision. Each paw was placed softly on the polished floor as he navigated the room, sniffing along the edges of tables, chairs, and scattered papers. Emily's eyes tracked every motion, her small finger twitching in recognition of the dog's meticulous process. She whispered to her mother, barely audible, "He's finding it. He knows where it is." Her mother nodded quietly, realizing that Emily's instinctive attention had not only anticipated Max's actions, but had also amplified the courtroom's awareness of his skill. Spectators gasped softly as Max approached a folder that had remained untouched, hidden partially under a stack of legal documents. The dog's nose hovered over it, sniffing with a precision that seemed almost supernatural. Emily's chest rose with excitement, her tiny fingers pointing, trembling with anticipation. "There," she whispered urgently. "He found it, Mommy, he knows." The courtroom's focus shifted entirely to the dog. Lawyers paused mid-sentence, witnesses froze in place, and even the judge leaned forward slightly, his pen poised in midair as his eyes followed Max. Officer Daniels gestured subtly, allowing Max to indicate the exact item of importance. The dog pawed gently at the folder, sitting afterward with perfect posture as if to signal, "This is it." Emily clapped her small hands softly, her eyes shining with pride and awe. "Mommy, he's showing them everything. He's amazing." Her mother, equally astonished, whispered back, "Yes, Emily, he's extraordinary." The courtroom was alive with quiet murmurs, the magnitude of the moment slowly sinking in. Everyone could feel that something remarkable was unfolding before them. The judge called for silence, motioning to the lawyers to examine the folder carefully. When it was opened, the contents revealed critical evidence that had been previously overlooked. The murmurs of astonishment grew louder as lawyers examined the documents, realizing the significance of what Max had discovered. The room shifted from skepticism to awe. Emily, still pointing toward the dog, whispered, "I knew it. He would find it." Her voice, small and innocent, carried a weight that seemed disproportionate to her size. But in that moment, it felt entirely appropriate. Spectators watched in rapt attention as the officer and Max demonstrated the discovery once more. The dog retraced his steps, moving from table to table, sniffing, pausing, and indicating significance at key points. Each precise motion highlighted crucial evidence that had been overlooked or misfiled. Emily's eyes followed every movement, whispering occasional observations to her mother. "See, Mommy, there. That one too, he knows." Her small exclamations punctuated the silence of the room, adding a childlike wonder to the otherwise solemn courtroom proceedings. Even the lawyers, often reserved and skeptical, could not hide their astonishment. One leaned slightly toward a colleague, murmuring, "I've seen K9 demonstrations before, but never in a courtroom setting, and never with a child pointing him out first." The judge nodded subtly, acknowledging the uniqueness of the moment. Max's discipline, combined with Emily's instinctive attention, had created a rare synergy, demonstrating the power of observation, intuition, and training in perfect harmony. Emily's mother glanced down at her daughter, whispering softly, "Sweetheart, you helped everyone notice him at the right time. That's incredible." Emily beamed, her small chest swelling with pride. She had spent hours observing Max, tracking every subtle gesture, anticipating his responses. Her instinct had guided the attention of the courtroom, and now everyone could see the dog's brilliance. Emily had not only witnessed a remarkable skill, but had also played a critical part in making it visible to others. The officer guided Max back to his original position beside him, kneeling briefly to reward the dog with a subtle hand signal and a gentle pat. Max settled calmly, his gaze still alert, acknowledging both the courtroom and, in a fleeting moment, Emily. The small girl's eyes met the dog's, a silent communication passing between them, a bond formed in the quiet intensity of observation and instinct. Emily whispered softly, "We did it, Max, we showed them." The dog's calm presence seemed to acknowledge her, as if sharing a quiet moment of triumph. The courtroom's focus shifted gradually back to the trial itself, but the energy remained transformed. Witnesses gave their statements with renewed focus, lawyers presented arguments with a heightened awareness, and the judge maintained his control with a quiet acknowledgement of the extraordinary demonstration they had just witnessed. Spectators, reporters, and legal professionals alike carried a sense of wonder, having seen how intuition and trained skill could converge in ways that transcended expectations. Emily's pointing and observation had catalyzed this recognition. Outside the courtroom, news of the moment began to circulate quickly. Reporters whispered about the child who had pointed out the police dog and the dog's subsequent discovery of critical evidence. Social media would soon capture the image of Emily's bold gesture, paired with Max's calm precision, creating a viral moment that would inspire thousands. Emily, unaware of her impending fame, sat quietly with her mother, proud of what she had seen and understood. She had recognized Max's importance long before the adults in the room had fully appreciated it. As the session continued, Emily's influence remained subtly present. Spectators leaned slightly toward her when Max moved, whispering about how remarkable it was that a child's intuition had highlighted the dog at precisely the right moment. Emily whispered occasionally, her voice full of excitement, recounting what she had observed. Each statement reinforced the unspoken connection between her and Max, and the courtroom seemed to respond to the quiet authority of her presence, combined with the dog's skill. By the end of the afternoon session, Emily and Max had become the unspoken heroes of the courtroom. The combination of instinct, observation, and training had revealed crucial evidence, transforming the trial in subtle but profound ways. Emily's intuition had guided attention at the perfect moment, and Max's disciplined response had validated her observation. Together, they had captured the hearts of every observer, demonstrating that even the smallest voices could influence the course of events in powerful ways. As the courtroom recessed, Emily whispered softly to her mother, "Mommy, he did it. He found everything I knew he would." Her mother hugged her gently, tears of pride glimmering in her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart, you helped him. You helped everyone see." Emily's chest swelled with quiet satisfaction. She had not only witnessed the extraordinary skill of a police dog but had actively participated in the process, guiding attention at precisely the right moment. Outside the courtroom, whispers of admiration and fascination continued to circulate. Lawyers discussed the unique demonstration, spectators shared their amazement, and reporters captured the story for the evening news. Emily's role, though small in physical stature, had been monumental in effect. Max had performed flawlessly, but it was the child's recognition and instinct that had made the performance visible and undeniable. Together, they had transformed a routine courtroom proceeding into a remarkable moment of collaboration, intuition, and heroism. Emily clutched her mother's hand as they left the courtroom, whispering to Max one last time, "We did it. Everyone saw what you can do." Max, obedient and alert, remained calm beside Officer Daniels, as though acknowledging the girl's words. Their bond, forged in moments of quiet observation, anticipation, and instinctive understanding, had left an indelible mark on the courtroom, inspiring everyone present to recognize the extraordinary potential of human and animal partnership. By the following morning, the story of Emily and Max had begun to ripple far beyond the courthouse walls. News vans lined the streets outside, their satellite dishes aimed at the building where the remarkable events had unfolded. Reporters scrambled to capture interviews, spectators shared viral videos, and social media exploded with hashtags celebrating the 4-year-old girl who had pointed out a police dog and the dog's astonishing discovery of critical evidence. Emily's mother held her daughter's hand tightly, shielding her from the overwhelming attention, while inside, Emily's wide eyes took in the chaos with quiet curiosity. "Mommy, look at all of them," Emily whispered, her small voice filled with awe. Her mother smiled, brushing a strand of hair from Emily's face. "Yes, sweetheart, everyone wants to hear about what you and Max did." Emily's chest puffed up with quiet pride. She had noticed Max's brilliance before anyone else, and now the world was beginning to see it too. Her tiny hand brushed Max's fur gently as he sat obediently beside Officer Daniels, calm amidst the swirl of human excitement. The courthouse steps were a flurry of activity. Local journalists approached Emily and her mother with microphones and cameras, eager to capture a soundbite for television and social media. Emily, shy yet confident, pointed discreetly toward Max, whispering to her mother, "He did everything. I just showed them." Her mother nodded, holding Emily close as she carefully explained to the reporters that Emily had been observing Max the entire trial, noticing his reactions and understanding his instincts in a way that was remarkable for her age. Across the city, viewers watched footage of Emily's bold courtroom gesture, her tiny finger pointing at Max, her eyes wide with certainty, and her small voice calling attention to the dog. News anchors marveled at the video, replaying it repeatedly, emphasizing the extraordinary bond between child and dog. Emily's story spread rapidly, capturing hearts nationwide. In classrooms, offices, and homes, people discussed how a 4-year-old girl had helped highlight the skill of a police dog during a real trial. The tale became a symbol of intuition, courage, and the unexpected ways even the smallest voices could influence events. Meanwhile, local residents began to arrive outside the courthouse, drawn by curiosity and admiration. Children watched Emily with wide eyes, inspired by her bravery and observation, while adults discussed the remarkable demonstration with a mixture of amazement and pride. Emily's mother guided her through the crowd carefully, shielding her from overwhelming attention, but Emily's excitement was palpable. "Mommy, everyone is seeing what I saw. Max is amazing," she whispered, her eyes sparkling. Max, calm and disciplined, sat obediently beside Officer Daniels, his amber gaze scanning the crowd with quiet awareness. The K-9 unit became an instant focus of attention. Police officers spoke to reporters about Max's training, his discipline, and his extraordinary ability to detect evidence in high-pressure situations. Emily's recognition of Max's skill added an entirely human element to the story, an innocence and instinct that had amplified the dog's abilities in the most unexpected way. Emily's small gestures, her pointing, and her observant whispers had catalyzed the moment that would now be remembered far beyond the city. Back at the courthouse, the judge reflected on the day's events with a quiet smile. "It is remarkable," he said, speaking to reporters in a brief statement, "that a child's keen observation could draw attention to such a critical part of this trial. It serves as a reminder that insight comes from unexpected sources, and sometimes the smallest voices can make the largest impact." The courtroom staff, lawyers, and witnesses nodded in agreement, acknowledging that the day had been extraordinary not just for the evidence uncovered, but for the way it had been revealed. Emily's mother helped her daughter step up to a small podium outside the courthouse for a brief interview with local reporters. Emily's eyes were wide but confident as she pointed subtly at Max, who sat obediently beside Officer Daniels. "He's the best dog ever," Emily whispered softly, her voice carrying a sincerity and wonder that resonated with everyone watching. Reporters smiled, recognizing that the child's charm and insight were central to the story. Footage of Emily pointing at Max quickly circulated online, becoming a viral sensation that touched hearts nationwide. Across social media, viewers shared, commented, and reposted the video of Emily and Max. Children drew pictures of the pair, depicting a brave little girl and a heroic police dog uncovering mysteries together. Parents told their children the story as an example of courage, observation, and the power of paying attention to small details. The courtroom story became more than news. It became a cultural moment, celebrating the extraordinary bond between humans and animals and the remarkable intuition of a child. Local community leaders recognized the significance of Emily and Max's actions. The police department organized a small ceremony to honor the young girl and the K-9 unit for their contributions to justice. Emily was presented with a certificate of recognition, her small hands gripping it tightly, eyes wide with amazement. Max, receiving a quiet pat from the officers, remained calm but alert, fully aware of the attention yet unbothered by it. Emily whispered softly, "We did it, Max." Everyone knows now. The bond between the two was undeniable, a silent understanding passing between child and dog that words could never capture. The story spread to neighboring towns and even across the state. Local newspapers ran full-page features on the child and the police dog who had captivated a courtroom and a community. Interviews highlighted Emily's keen observation, her instinctive connection to Max, and the way her pointing gesture had drawn attention at precisely the right moment. Emily, despite her young age, was celebrated for her courage, her curiosity, and her ability to see what adults had overlooked. Max, calm and disciplined, was lauded for his extraordinary training and instinctive response. Even in the trial itself, the impact of Emily and Max's actions continued to resonate. Lawyers referenced the discovered evidence with renewed clarity, witnesses, testimonies were reinforced by the dog's precise indications, and the judge acknowledged the unique circumstances with a quiet nod. Emily's role, small in size but monumental in influence, had transformed the trial. The courtroom, once a space of rigid procedure, had become a stage for an extraordinary partnership between human intuition and canine skill. As the day drew to a close, Emily and her mother returned home, Emily's small hand still resting gently on Max's fur. "Mommy, everyone saw what I saw," she whispered, her eyes shining with pride. Her mother smiled, heart full of admiration for her daughter's insight and courage. "Yes, sweetheart, and they'll never forget it. You helped show everyone just how incredible Max is." Emily's chest swelled with quiet triumph. She had not only witnessed the extraordinary skill of a police dog, but had actively played a pivotal role in revealing it to the world. Even as the media continued to report on the story, Emily remained focused on Max. She knew instinctively that their partnership had achieved something remarkable. The courtroom had witnessed it, the community had celebrated it, and the story had spread far beyond their city. Yet for Emily, the most important part was simple. She had been right about Max, and together they had shared something extraordinary with the world. Weeks had passed since the courtroom drama that had captured the hearts of the city, and the story of Emily and Max had continued to resonate far beyond the courthouse. Newspapers, television segments, and social media platforms still shared the tale of a 4-year-old girl whose instinct had highlighted the brilliance of a police dog. Emily's bold gesture and Max's precise actions had become more than a courtroom anecdote. They had become a symbol of intuition, courage, and the extraordinary connection between humans and animals. Emily, sitting in the warm sunlight of her family's living room, gazed at Max as he lay calmly beside her. "Max," she whispered, brushing his soft fur with her small hands, "we did something amazing, didn't we?" The dog's amber eyes flicked toward her, a quiet acknowledgement passing between them. Though he could not speak, Max seemed to understand her words perfectly, the bond between them deepened by shared triumph and unspoken trust. Emily's mother watched silently from across the room, marveling at the connection she had witnessed for months, the quiet awareness and mutual understanding between a child and her dog. In the courthouse, the trial had concluded successfully, in large part due to the evidence Max had uncovered. The lawyers acknowledged the significance of the overlooked folder, crediting Max's discovery for clarifying critical points of the case. The judge, who had witnessed Emily's pointing gesture firsthand, reflected on the unusual but extraordinary events. "This courtroom rarely sees moments like today," he noted during his closing remarks. "A child's awareness and a trained police dog's skill have reminded us all that insight and courage can come from the most unexpected sources." Emily's story had become a topic of local and even national discussion. Schools invited her to share her experience with children, emphasizing the importance of observation, listening, and paying attention to details others might overlook. Emily, shy but proud, would recount the story, her finger instinctively gesturing toward Max, who remained calm beside her during presentations. Children were captivated, imagining themselves in her place, recognizing the possibility that even a small person could influence events in extraordinary ways. The K-9 unit recognized the impact Max had made. Officer Daniels received commendations for his training and guidance of the dog, but he often emphasized that Emily's instinct had been the catalyst for the dog's demonstration. "Max is incredible," he would say, "but Emily's awareness made all the difference. She knew what to look for, and she guided us all in the right direction." Emily's mother smiled quietly, proud of her daughter's intuition, knowing that this moment would become a lifelong memory of courage, curiosity, and partnership. Back in the courtroom, the ripple effects continued. Lawyers referenced the case as an example of how unconventional contributions could affect outcomes. Witnesses spoke with newfound confidence, acknowledging that the overlooked evidence had clarified points critical to the trial. Even the spectators who had been present that day reflected on the remarkable partnership they had witnessed, a moment when a child's instinct and a dog's training converged to reveal truth. The courtroom, once a place of rigid procedure, had been transformed by a quiet, almost magical collaboration. Emily, now accustomed to the occasional attention from media and community, had remained remarkably grounded. She understood in her own childlike way that what she had seen was extraordinary, yet she did not boast or exaggerate. Instead, she spent quiet moments with Max, observing him, whispering to him, and learning from his calm attentiveness. Their bond had become more than a moment in the courtroom. It had become a shared understanding that would guide Emily for years to come, teaching her about observation, patience, and trust. Community members often recounted the story, speaking with pride and amazement about the courage and insight of a little girl and her dog. Children drew pictures of Emily pointing at Max in the courtroom, and local writers published articles emphasizing the importance of recognizing extraordinary abilities in unexpected ways. Emily became a quiet symbol of intuition and courage, and Max became celebrated not only as a trained police dog, but as a partner in a remarkable story of discovery and bravery. Emily's mother reflected on the whirlwind of attention that had followed them. She marveled at how a simple act, a child noticing a dog's focus and pointing it out, had captivated a city, a courtroom, and eventually a nation. "It's incredible," she whispered to herself one evening, watching Emily curl up beside Max. "How much power there is in observation, in paying attention, and in trusting instinct." Emily saw what adults overlooked, and Max brought it to life. Her heart swelled with pride, knowing that her daughter had learned lessons of courage, awareness, and collaboration that would shape her understanding of the world. The courthouse itself commemorated the day quietly but meaningfully. A plaque was placed in the hallway, celebrating Max's contributions to justice and noting Emily's role in recognizing his skill. Visitors often paused to read it, children gazing wide-eyed at the tale of a brave little girl and a disciplined police dog. Emily and Max would occasionally visit, their presence a reminder of the extraordinary events that had unfolded. Spectators, young and old, were inspired by the story, proof that heroes can come in many forms, from the smallest and youngest among us to the most trained and disciplined. Even months later, Emily's bold gesture continued to be shared in news segments and online articles. The story became a touchstone for discussions about the value of intuition, observation, and cross-species collaboration. People marveled at how a 4-year-old girl could command attention in a courtroom, guiding focus to a dog whose skill would change the outcome of a trial. Emily, of course, remained humble, watching Max with quiet pride, understanding that the bond they shared had created something lasting and meaningful. One quiet afternoon, Emily sat on the steps of her home, Max lying peacefully at her side. She gently stroked his fur, whispering, "Max, we did it. Everyone saw what you can do." Max lifted his head, looking at her with calm, intelligent eyes as if understanding every word. Emily's mother watched from the porch, smiling softly. The girl had grown in ways subtle but profound, more aware of her surroundings, more confident in her intuition, and deeply connected to the loyal, vigilant dog beside her. The legacy of that courtroom day was not only in the evidence uncovered or the trial won. It was in the lasting impression left on everyone who had witnessed the story unfold. Spectators, reporters, lawyers, and judges carried with them a sense of wonder, inspired by the quiet courage of a child and the disciplined skill of a dog. Emily and Max had become more than participants in a trial. They had become symbols of hope, trust, and the extraordinary potential that lies in paying attention to the world around us. In the evening, as the sun set over the city, Emily whispered once more to Max, her small hands resting gently on his fur. "Thank you, Max, for helping me show everyone." The dog's tail wagged softly, his eyes meeting hers with unwavering calm. The bond between them had been tested, proven, and celebrated. It was a connection forged in observation, trust, and shared purpose, a connection that would last a lifetime. And so the story of Emily and Max became a legend of sorts, a tale recounted in classrooms, newspapers, and homes, reminding everyone that even the smallest, youngest, or seemingly quietest among us can have an extraordinary impact. The courthouse had been the stage, but the legacy extended far beyond its walls. A child's instinct, combined with a dog's disciplined skill, had proven that sometimes heroes come in unexpected forms, and that paying attention can change everything. As the city settled into night, Emily curled up beside Max, her tiny hands brushing his fur as they rested together. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "We did something amazing, Max, everyone knows now." Max rested his head on her lap, calm and protective, the silent guardian and companion who had shared in her journey. Together, they had left an indelible mark on their city, their community, and the hearts of everyone who had witnessed their extraordinary partnership.